This sport had one foot in the grave and another on a banana peel. We were in trouble. And so you've got to give credit where credit is due. Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta and Dana White saved the sport.
The rise and fall of a fighting legend named Pat Miletich is a story woven into the raw, unpolished fabric of early mixed martial arts, MMA. He was a pioneer, a champion whose dominance in the cage was matched only by his ability to forge warriors who would carve their names into the sport's history. Hailed as a cornerstone of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC, his name once roared through crowded arenas, a symbol of grit and glory. Yet, his journey took a harrowing turn. Legal battles, polarizing controversies, and a gradual erasure from the sport he helped sculpt left him a shadow of his former self. What drove the unraveling of a man who laid the foundation for the UFC's rise? This is the tale of a fighter, a mentor, and a legacy buried beneath silence. A saga of triumph and tragedy that echoes beyond the octagon. Born in Davenport, Iowa, with Croatian blood fueling his spirit, Pat Miletich was never the most gifted athlete. His strength lay in an unbreakable will. Shaped by the disciplined ethos of the Midwest, he was a wrestler at his core, a street fighter when circumstances demanded, and a master strategist by choice. His combat journey began not in sleek gyms with polished equipment, but in gritty, blood-splattered rings where rules were scarce and survival trumped pay. In the mid-1990s, MMA was a fledgling sport, a chaotic blend of brute force, clashing styles, and untamed potential. Where others saw disorder, Pat saw opportunity. He didn't just aim to compete, he sought to redefine the game. When he entered the UFC in 1998, he was an enigma to fans. Quiet, unassuming, and methodical, his fighting style lacked the dazzle of high kicks or wild punches. Instead, he brought relentless pressure, suffocating ground control, and a mind that dissected opponents like a surgeon. He captured the UFC lightweight title, later rebranded as the welterweight belt, by outmaneuvering foes with more speed, reach, or hype. His victories were born of strategy, not spectacle. He defended his title, built an enduring record, and forced the UFC to recognize the value of cerebral combat. Fans began to take notice, not because of brash words, Pat shunned trash talk, but because of his results. Dubbed the Croatian sensation, he became an emblem of perseverance and precision. Yet, his ambitions reached far beyond personal accolades. He dreamed of crafting a legacy that would reshape the sport for generations. Pat's vision crystallized in a bold new chapter. After solidifying his status as a champion, he turned his focus to a grander goal, creating a crucible where elite fighters could be forged. In the unassuming town of Bettendorf, Iowa, he established Miletich Fighting Systems, MFS. The gym was modest, far from the glitzy facilities of coastal cities, but it became a beacon of transformation. Pat didn't merely coach, he sculpted champions with a meticulous hand. His system produced a roster of legends: Matt Hughes, a future UFC welterweight titan and Hall of Famer; Jens Pulver, the inaugural UFC lightweight champion; Tim Sylvia, a towering heavyweight who claimed the crown; Robbie Lawler, a ferocious brawler destined to become one of MMA's most revered figures; and Spencer Fisher, a lightweight known for his technical skill and unyielding heart. These fighters absorbed Pat's philosophy: intelligence over arrogance, efficiency over flash, and control over chaos. MFS was no ordinary gym. It was a laboratory of combat innovation. For a golden era, Pat's fighters dominated multiple UFC weight classes. From a small Iowa town, far from the bright lights of Las Vegas, they stormed the octagon and emerged with belts. The MMA world stood in awe. UFC President Dana White, lauded the system's success. Commentators praised Pat's leadership. Analysts noted that MFS fighters didn't just win, they endured, outlasting opponents with a blend of physical and mental toughness. Pat instilled a military-like discipline, enforcing strict diets, razor-sharp tactics, and a unified mindset. His gym became a brotherhood, where fighters trained, lived, and supported each other like kin. MFS set a template for future super gyms, influencing powerhouses like American Top Team and Jackson Wink. But with such heights came intense pressure, and with pressure came the first signs of fracture. As the 2000s unfolded, the MMA landscape began to shift dramatically. The sport grew faster, younger, and more international. New techniques, from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Muay Thai, revolutionized training. Rival camps emerged with cutting-edge methods, specialized coaches, and deeper funding. At MFS, the cracks began to show. Some fighters sought greener pastures. Robbie Lawler moved to American Top Team. Matt Hughes grew distant, pursuing his own path. Jens Pulver's star waned. Some departures were amicable, others left tension in their wake. The gym, once brimming with world-class talent, started to feel hollow. Pat's intense, old-school approach, rooted in grit and discipline, lost its universal appeal. Critics whispered that his methods were outdated, unable to keep pace with the sport's rapid evolution. Yet, Pat pressed on. He took on commentary roles with promotions like Strikeforce and Legacy Fighting Alliance, where his deep knowledge shone through. But his public persona began to change. No longer content with analyzing fights, Pat started voicing strong opinions on politics, government overreach, and conspiracy theories. His social media became a platform for fiery posts, challenging mainstream narratives. The MMA community grew uneasy. Promotions quietly stopped inviting him. Media outlets skipped his name when recounting the sport's early heroes. He wasn't formally blacklisted, but his exclusion from the UFC's inner circle was palpable. His fingerprints remained on the fighters he trained, celebrated in highlight reels and Hall of Fame tributes, but Pat himself was conspicuously absent. The stage was set for a steeper decline as controversies and legal troubles loomed on the horizon. Pat Miletich's descent wasn't marked by a single cataclysmic event, but by a slow, corrosive transformation. As his roles in coaching and commentary dwindled, he leaned harder into his public platform, using it to air polarizing views. He questioned official accounts of major events, from 9/11 to pandemic policies, and accused the media of widespread manipulation. Podcasts, live streams, and interviews became his new battleground, where he wielded a microphone with the same intensity he once brought to the cage. To his devoted supporters, he was a fearless voice, unafraid to challenge authority. To others, he was unrecognizable, a far cry from the stoic champion they admired. The UFC observed in silence, issuing no statements, but quietly withdrawing support. Invitations to events ceased. His name vanished from narratives honoring MMA's pioneers. Then came January 6, 2021, a day that would deepen his isolation. Pat was seen outside the U.S. Capitol during the protests, insisting he was there peacefully, and left before violence erupted. But images of him near individuals in tactical gear spread rapidly online, igniting a firestorm. Legacy Fighting Alliance, where he served as a commentator, announced his departure soon after. Pat claimed the decision was mutual, but the optics were damning. He defended himself in interviews, accusing the media of distortion and the MMA world of cowardice. Yet, the silence from his peers, including many fighters he had mentored, spoke louder than any critique. The blows kept coming. On June 28, 2021, Pat was arrested in Iowa for operating a vehicle while intoxicated. Police found him asleep behind the wheel of a running car at a gas station in the early morning hours. He failed a sobriety test and was taken into custody. His mugshot, showing a weary and disheveled man, spread across MMA news outlets like wildfire. The champion, once celebrated for his discipline, now faced public humiliation. Reactions varied. Some fans expressed concern, others mocked him mercilessly. Days later, Pat addressed the arrest on a podcast, admitting he had been drinking during a difficult time and had stopped to sober up before driving. He sounded defiant, frustrated, but beneath it all, deeply hurt. The arrest wasn't just a legal issue, it was a symbol of his broader unraveling: rejection by the sport, loss of purpose, and growing isolation. There's a profound tragedy in a man who built a kingdom but lost the keys to its gates. Yet, Pat's legacy persists, not in trophies or plaques, but in the habits, philosophies, and DNA of a sport that owes him more than it admits. A legacy unspoken, however, can feel like no legacy at all. At 58, Pat Miletich is a far cry from the fighter who ruled UFC 16, or the coach who guided Matt Hughes to glory. His hair is grayer, his movements slower, his face etched with the scars of time and turmoil. The weight of his past, controversies, arrests, broken bonds, rests heavily on him. Yet, he rises each day, training, speaking, and showing up, even when the crowds are gone. The UFC has evolved into a billion-dollar empire, its athletes polished, media savvy, and young. There's little room for a figure as complex and flawed as Pat. The new generation doesn't know him, and many of the old guard avoid his name. Behind the headlines and the silence, though, remains a man who once stood atop a brutal sport and shaped it with his own hands. A man who gave everything to a world that eventually turned away. Pat isn't seeking reinstatement or statues. He doesn't demand apologies. He simply wants his story told truthfully. In a recent podcast, he said, "If I'm gone tomorrow, just say I fought hard. I built something real. I tried." That's his hope. Not sainthood, not perfection, but recognition. Because Pat Miletich was a champion, a mentor, a builder of dynasties. And though his world crumbled, the foundation he laid endures, unshaken by the silence that surrounds it.